overall, I mean, our main focus, right, is the habitat side of it. But absolutely, like food plots can be additive to that habitat and be beneficial. And it really just goes back to those landowner goals and everything that way.
The Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Predator Camo.
Man, this one feels good, right? I know people have been looking at this picture over your shoulder for a while now. I think that was 2018, but we just, over the last, how many years, keep coming back to Predator Camo because it's been so damn good for us.
No doubt. I think we bought our first set off of Jen at the Archer Trade Show almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And Jen's still with the company, and the patterns have, only improved since then. They actually were recently acquired within the past couple of years. We've had a chance this past year to go and meet with new ownership, talk about redesigning a lot of the old lines, plans for new patterns, all of the above. So really excited about what's to come, not only this coming year, but in years to come. There's a lot of good stuff coming from Predator.
Yeah, and I mean, for us, it's always been going back to that breakup pattern, right? That's the historic look, whether you're talking about the spring greens or brown deceptions or fall grays. Yeah. I mean, that breakup is really what's been so powerful for us in a tree stand. And right now, they're letting anyone use the code HUNTER on the Predator Camo website and get 20% off any of the lines, including all the new stuff that dropped here in July.
Be the Predator.
And we're back.
Hey,
on our podcast, episode 314. As Nick put numbers back in, so I know it's
we are on track for sure. 314.
Yeah, we were a little off track there for a second, but yeah, we're back.
Well, hey, thank you guys for being here. Whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, we appreciate you tuning in from week to week. We drop these episodes every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you give us a like, follow, or subscribe on one of those platforms, it will notify you, give you a dinger when these things drop. So if you've written us on Instagram DM or the website, those are the two that we check the most frequently. And I'll apologize right here and now. I know for a fact I'm pretty far behind on the email stuff. So a lot of you guys have written stuff, good stuff. I skim them and then I flag them and they're there. So at some point, I'll do a mass email response here, and we'll get those all taken care of. But we have some Hunter merch on the website, new merch, new website coming a little bit later this year. In the meantime, you guys can use code HUNTER, HUNTR, for a discount on any of our partners' websites in some way, shape, or form. With a few, missing here and there, but I think we post those in the descriptions of these videos every week, so you can check that out. And other than that, here we go.
Speaking of, and we won't delay our guest too long today, but speaking of emails we came in, we had made some comments about what we were doing for beans and planting this year, and one of our listeners sent us a really cool project that they did, was some side-by-side comparisons.
It was cool.
I believe it was in southern Michigan too, if I'm looking at that correctly. And so they had done Real World Gen 2. They did Eagle Seed Multi-Max, and then they did conventional Enlist beans.
Enlist beans,
Yep. Side-by-side comparison, and primarily looking at...
Ben Hirschberger from...
There you go. Michigan, right?
Southern Michigan.
Southern Michigan.
There you
go. Primarily looking at, like, how long did those beans stay green from a foliage standpoint. And the Eagle Seed Multi-Max outlasted them both by a long shot.
By far,
Yep. In fact, and I say southern Michigan just so that people can get an idea of climate and, obviously getting cooler up there. But he said he had green beans into November and actually killed bucks over them. So
I think I've got a shared experience. When I used to plant Eagle Seed beans, I remember they were green super late also.
Yep. So
that was like the reason to plant them.
Yeah, and I think he also addressed kind of your concern, which was around the pod production, and he basically said, hey, if a Real World Gen 2 is a 10 out of 10 in pod production, it was 6 or 7 out of 10. So with those in mind, I ordered Multi-Max from Eagle Seed this year. So I'm going to go and try the Eagle Seed Multi-Max in Kentucky this year with the hopes of having green beans as late as or as long as possible to maybe, quote unquote, battle some of the loss to acorns and other things in those hills. So we'll see. Again, at the end of the day, like, we don't know anything when it comes to what's right and what's wrong. It's just a matter of trial and error and what were the results and, were you satisfied with them? And, if not, then make a change. And if it gets worse, then you go back. Like it's really a trial and error type of thing.
You know, it would be interesting in a state like Kentucky, or I guess really any bait state, is like, because there seems to be that loss of or dispersal when you have the acorn crops and stuff like that. What if you just filled a feeder with acorns?
I don't know.
Like, has anybody ever done that? Would they eat it?
Probably not.
I know there's like acorn. You got your acorn rages and
it's a lot of collection,
different stuff like that. I wonder, can you get them places? Like, can you buy acorns?
I know. I think so, because I think didn't Bill?
Yeah.
He would get them in sacks.
Yeah.
I know that there's places that have their collection bins, and they basically put them under oak trees, and it's a wire basket.
That's awesome.
And so they just.
Yeah.
I know they've done that for research projects. I assume they do it for other stuff.
Have to,
as well.
yeah, for like just seed collection for whatever. Yeah, there's probably like tree nurseries where they
for sure
do that.
For sure. So yeah, I'm
Our
sure
guest
that
will
there
know.
are.
I'm sure about
Yeah,
sure.
he probably will. So yeah, I don't know, and that's a farm that I haven't traditionally fed like anything on, really, because I've had so much food that hasn't been the issue necessarily. Like there's always food. It's just the attractiveness through the changing of the seasons.
Yeah, and just the dynamic of that herd down there. Like I think the vastness of space they have, and it's just it's just in their DNA, I think, to disperse and be in the big woods. So
we're gonna try some different things. That, and at the same time, I got some. It's their Eagle Seed wild game sorghum. So I'm gonna do some breakup of some of the bigger fields with sorghum this year instead of corn, and see how that kind of has an effect on the deer too. So trying some things like cool. They'll have plenty of food. I'm just going to change it up a little bit and what's there, and still do green plots and stuff as well. But anyways, thought I'd mention that in terms of we do pay attention to the emails.
Yeah, and that'll be cool.
Yeah,
and we can compare, because I'm going to stick with the Gen 2 beans, and because my emphasis is for sure on the pods. So.
Yeah, you've got offsetting ag beans around during the summer to separate out. I don't have that. So, yeah, should be good. Anyways, guess today.
Yeah, so, and forgive me, I should know. I do know it, but I can't remember. Brandon's last name but Brandon's from...
Bell?
Brandon, he can correct us. It's fine. It does sound like it starts with B. Is from Pheasants Forever.
Yep.
And he can fill us in more formally on his stuff. We know Brandon pretty informally, and have, so we hooked up with him there at ATA, and I think he had reached out prior. He actually came to our Illinois farm and spent, maybe half a day with mom and dad and I.
Yep.
Getting eyes on some CRP projects, and whether it has a role at Pheasants Forever or not, he's very involved with the seed mixtures and diagnosis, and he's just very passionate about managing habitat conservation and, improving. He's very knowledgeable on the seed blends and stuff like that. He's actually helping me with an order through Pheasants Forever for seeds for the clear cut in Ohio.
Yep.
Some switch border stuff like that for our CRP mixes in Illinois when we go to replant some stuff. Brandon's kind of the guy for that. So
and I think it'll be cool just because people hear
Belsner?
Pheasants Forever, quail forever, and don't think about habitat for deer in that same mindset. And so obviously we've been picking Brandon's brain with a deer focus on things. And so having that knowledge and having that background and understanding that habitat's habitat at the end of the day.
Beltz. That's what it is.
Beltz.
With a Z.
What did I say? Bell. I said Bell.
You were close.
Yeah, Beltz.
Right closer than I was.
Swimmy, swammy. Samsonite. And so.
Close.
Yeah. Anyways, let's bring Brandon in. All right. Brandon, appreciate you coming on. We were all dancing around your last name.
No worries. Yeah. A belt like you wear with a Z on the end of it. That's what I tell people
there you
over
go.
the phone.
And in Illinois is home?
Yes. So, born and raised South Central Illinois, just north of Effingham, Interstate 70 that goes across basically halfway between St. Louis and Indy. So, just north there a little bit, but I've worked in Illinois in a few different areas with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Actually started as our first farm bill biologist when we started that program, brought it to Illinois back in 2010. So I've been with the organization a long time as that biologist. I worked in basically. We have biologists across in many states, but I basically worked local county areas, doing more of those direct site visits, program related, non-program, just kind of free information is what we like to say about habitat managing and planting different projects and everything that way. So
yeah,
I've also been on our regional rep team. So Pheasants Forever as a whole, we're a habitat organization, so definitely that's our bread and butter. That's what we like to do and promote and work with landowners on. But we have local chapters as well. We're a nonprofit wildlife habitat organization, so we have local chapters spread out across different states as well that do local fundraising and then put that money back towards habitat. One difference with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever is that our chapters keep control of all the money they raise. So 100% of the money they raise stays in that local control. Of course, we do have state initiatives, national initiatives, and everything that they can support. But that's all decided on essentially by those local chapters. So
yeah. Brandon, did you get hired by Pheasants Forever like right out of college? You've been in there for 16 years now at this point. So
yeah, not quite. So I had a couple of years. I actually I worked in Southeast Iowa whenever I graduated and was in a similar position. It was a partnership with the local chapter in the Soil and Water Conservation District there in Lee County, Iowa. So basically I was 15 miles north of Missouri and 15 miles west of Illinois. So about as little as you could be in Iowa, but worked there and covered a couple counties for a year. And then transferred back to Illinois to a soil and water conservation district, not too far away here, central part of the state. And then kind of I was there for a year, and then we started the program, and it was just kind of an easy slide into that position to be more focused on the wildlife habitat, programs and just projects in those areas.
Yeah. So did you it's funny in the name, even as Jeremy and I sit and talk about it, it's like, our focus is on like deer, right? And so I'm just curious, did you have an interest in pheasants or quail early on, or how did it overlap with, either your interest or what you're working on at your first job there?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I didn't grow up really pheasant or quail hunting. It was mainly deer hunting, where I was at. We did have, I've seen quail like growing up and everything that way. And my dad had hunted a couple times with some buddies and everything, quail hunted, but, kind of when I was in high school, college, numbers just, honestly in the areas that I'm at weren't great. So my focus absolutely was the outdoors, and just all wildlife. And so, these programs, the biologist positions and everything are really, yes, our organization is Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Mm-hmm. We are a habitat organization. And so we do a number of projects. We work with landowners that don't have pheasants or quail, on their properties or in their area. And our focus is just kind of that diverse habitat that we know will benefit pheasants and quail if they are in the area. But overall, it's going to benefit the more diversity we're doing and building into, whether it's seed mixes or just different areas of properties and everything that way. The more beneficial it is for all sorts of wildlife, game and non-game species. So
yeah, well, that's awesome, man. Dude, your passion, and I assume it extends to the agency, like for conservation, is evident and contagious. Listeners to the podcast might not ever know, but you went out of your way when we were in Illinois to drive up. I don't know what that was for you, 3, 4, 5 hours. And we've been trying to sync that up, and you made an effort at ATA too. So because for us, it's hard to pin down and be like, I don't know. We get seed from different places, and there's different ideas and stuff like that. And so, I would say you've really gone out of your way to really, just spend time with us, educating us on stuff and helping us get seed blends and stuff. And so that's, speaks, I think, really well to the organization. So.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, and I think overall in our organization, like the passion for conservation, wildlife habitat is there throughout all of our biologists, all of our positions, our chapters, even, the focus is there that, we just have that passion. I love, and it is education, 90% of what we do is just educating, the public, landowners, just anyone on what's out there as far as programs to help do conservation on properties, but then even just the establishment questions, management questions, how to plant questions. In my current role, I'm the Great Lakes conservation specialist. So I design seed mixes, wildlife habitat and food plot seed mixes to have available throughout the states I cover, which right now is Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan mainly, and we've got 5 other conservation specialists spread out across the U.S. That cover different regions and everything that way. So we're there, and then those local biologists are spread out across states, across the U.S. as well, and they're covering more of a smaller, like 6 to maybe even 10 county area, depending on where they're located.
Gotcha. So is right now kind of like a crazy time of year for you guys? Is everybody scrambling to get seed together and stuff like that?
Absolutely. So as far as seeding and everything goes, the minute we had a warm day there in March, and the sun was out and everyone was spending time outside, it's like, oh, I should think about getting my seed so I'm ready to plant here before too long.
Yeah.
And that's one of the so yeah, springtime is for sure. For our native habitat mixes, it's going to vary by state, right? But overall, like, we're trying to get everything planted by June, in most areas. And the further north you go, it's going to spread out a little bit longer. And then further south you go, you can actually, we want to get it in before the hot, dry dog days of summer, essentially are there. We want to have a little bit of moisture in the ground, and the soil temperature. We want to be pretty warm to initiate that when we're talking more like native warm season grasses and wildflowers. So
yeah. And Brent, is that like a majority of what you guys are dealing with and distributing and stuff, or like what's kind of the what's the spread on the types of seeds and habitat projects you guys are working on?
Yeah, so on our seed program, we have a national seed program, and we design basically mixes. First and foremost, we want to make sure that there's mixes that meet certain state program requirements. So whether that's CRP, EQIP, CSP, or any local, sometimes there's DNR projects, or local chapter projects. So for each state that we cover, we try to have multiple mixes available to meet different program requirements, but also we're building in the diversity into those mixes that just really improve and make it beneficial for all types of wildlife. So overall, I mean, our main focus, right, is the habitat side of it, but definitely like food plot seed we do have available. We have different mixes designed for different species and everything too. So we do have, some deer mixes, more quail focused mixes, pheasant mixes. Our dove candy sunflowers is one of those that, people plant a lot across the U.S. But I would say and those are additive, right? I always focus is going to be habitat first, and then absolutely food plots can be additive to that habitat, and be beneficial. And it really just goes back to those landowner goals and everything that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you think about the Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever side, like I said, a lot of people immediately kind of drift to the Midwest. But I mean, you've got presence obviously in the Southeast from a quail side especially, but like even here in Pennsylvania, it's not like we have a ton of native populations of bobwhites or pheasants here. But I know that the organization is very active in the state.
Absolutely. Yeah. We like I said, I mean, the the base of our organization is our tagline, we're the habitat organization. So our focus is on habitat, native habitat for the most part. But then again, like the food plots, fire breaks, not non-native clovers and everything are used in fire breaks a lot and everything that way. But the focus is just to have those biologists, the knowledge and everything to share. We do partner with USDA on a lot of positions and everything that way. So that's where you'll see, a lot of local biologists are working out of USDA offices and able to provide more the wildlife, knowledge to some of these programs. And definitely, the soil erosion and water quality are, 1 and 2, and wildlife, especially with CRP programs, EQIP programs, CSP programs, those are all focuses as well.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that Pheasants Forever, because our path to, into Pheasants Forever and our relationship with you and stuff, a lot of that was prompted by
CRP.
Either CRP, EQIPs, like some of those more involved projects through the states and stuff. So it's like your NRCS guys, your USDA guys, even the DNR, all of them kind of like the default answer as well. Pheasants Forever kind of has a mix for that. So, and I imagine that is your business model, right? So that's been the goal of the organization for a long time, but it has been super helpful, And so as we're looking for, as we tear into some of these projects, like some of this EQIP stuff, we're right on the very front end of. Some of the non-funded projects are just timber management, clear cut stuff that Jeremy and I have been working on. We're like, what's the deal with this? How do we promote? Do we plant something into this? So there's been a pretty big learning curve for us over the past year. And in a minute here, I'll get into, we can do the specific, seed blend that you guys prescribed for our Ohio. I don't want to put you on the spot with every single seed that's in that thing here, but it would be fun, I think, to run through it, and we can talk about, why that stuff is in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's our goal, is to, have diverse mixes that are available and meet program requirements, but then also, we don't want the cost of a project, a seeding, to basically keep people from doing a project, right? Because you can build mixes that are, I get custom quotes sometimes to price for someone, and it may be $1,000 to $3,000 an acre.
Wow.
And just not knowing what, looking at different amounts of specific species and the cost of species. So it really is, having that knowledge of what's available. If something's really limited supply, then that's, going to drive the price up on that specific species. So even from year to year, we may try to tweak some mixes, just to make sure that, they're competitive, right? And the pricing just isn't keeping people from doing the projects. So we know most projects are getting done, through programs. So they're, cost share and things that way. And we don't want just the price of projects to keep people from doing them. We want that habitat on the ground and then managed, right? That's a big part of it is, these are, for the most part, true perennials. They're going to grow back every year, but it's not a plant it and walk away and expect it to just be fine. There is maintenance, yearly maintenance, I try to tell people, and management, that needs to happen kind of throughout the life of that planting.
There's a reality of, from a cost standpoint and from an effort and input standpoint of like true scale land management too, and it's like, and everybody's kind of at a different, place with that. I think there was a time where we're like, I could put in a little clover food plot, I could it was just the very initial things here. And different people will take it to different lengths, but it's like every year it seems like we're like, I'm going to manage this thing at scale here. I've got a 12-acre clear cut that I want to invest into, and so the quote I have from you guys is essentially it's like $2,000, like $200 per acre kind of a thing for seed to go into this. But I'm like, those are the landscape level changes, I think, that, a little clover food plot is great and it's awesome, and whatever deer are there, I can probably it can aid in my hunting strategy. But if I want to hold, and have better habitat for all wildlife and more density of cover for mature bucks and stuff, especially, which is my goal, I'm like, that's the way to do that. Between plannings like that and managing your timber more effectively, involving more, state programs if necessary for funding on that stuff, I'm feeling like we're gaining some knowledge on that. We're gaining some traction there too. I have some of these projects kind of in motion, which is a lot of fun to see.
Mm-hmm. I guess, Brandon, like a lot of people would look at, let's say like a large scale project what Jared's doing with this clear cut, and even not saying all of his recommendations, but I look at like a Craig Harper who's basically like, just let it go.
Yeah.
Like there's natural stuff in the seed bed. There is some management from an old field standpoint or from a timber stand improvement standpoint. But beyond that, it's like the native seed's there. It's in the soil. Just let it go. I guess what, from your point of view, would be a situation where, like in Jared's case, it's like, hey, we're going to put, new seed into the seed bed on a 10 to 12 acre spread versus, just burning it and kind of letting it go with natural seeds and habitat.
For context on that question, Brandon, like we had these discussions with, and it's not that either of these guys were right or wrong, but we were trying to understand, like, how do we turn nothing into something? How do we turn pasture into cover, essentially? And on one hand, you have a Craig Harper methodology, which is just let it grow, kill the non-desirables out of it and let it do its thing. Over 5, 10, 15 years, it'll eventually, reforestation is a natural process. That's what will happen. And then we had Jeff Sturgis on the other hand, and many others, I'm sure, who was like, no, if you want it to, if you want cover now, you got to plant something, kind of a thing. And I tried a couple different combinations of both, and ultimately, don't know if I was totally satisfied, but that's what brought us to this point. It was those two methodologies.
Absolutely. So, I across the landscape, what we run into the most is non-native and or invasive species that have now outcompeted most natives, true natives in areas. So anything that was pasture, is going to have cool season grasses in it, more for tonnage. That was the goal of those original plantings. I after talking to you about your clear cut project, right? You did do that. You sprayed it, you burn it, let it grow, and eventually it came back to cool season grasses. Like those, right. You weren't able to eliminate. And so that is a process. Like for that area, if you wanted to just keep doing that, spraying every year, every 2 years, and just kind of allowing natural succession to happen, you can do that, but you've got to manage those invasives and specifically cool season grasses are worst enemies to good diverse habitat getting established. So just the growth of most cool season grasses is going to be more carpet like. So it's gonna the root system is going to grow out and it wants to cover up every inch of bare soil, right? So be thick at the ground level.
Yeah. What is the deal with cool season grasses, Brandon? Are those are native, I assume, right? And so like my context that I'm bringing to the conversation is it's Ohio, and a majority of that area or that region, it's cool season grasses by default. I always assumed those are a native thing that exists, right?
For the most part, a lot of them are planted to tall fescue, which is not really native for those areas. So
it's just been there as pasture ground for a long time.
And you're saying these pastures may have been planted to that at one time?
I think they all were. It was probably all woodlot at one point. Those were all woods.
Absolutely.
Well, what about stuff that is inherent has always been field?
It's not.
Those exist, right?
No. Those are man-made fields.
I guess. Do fields exist naturally?
They can, and you will find that more. I feel like more maybe further east, right, and south. Craig Harper, great information. I mean, great biologist. That information. And there's a ton, right? There's a lot of people with great knowledge. but yeah, the landscape, we have changed the landscape as in
Mm-hmm.
humans, right? To accomplish our goals, and not always thinking about the long-term effects of those changes. So yeah, for the most part, pastures have been planted
Wow.
Yeah,
originally,
agricultural.
and get reseeded a lot,
Yeah.
to try to keep that tonnage there. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is a process. If you had your clear cut, is kind of one of those.
So that was
It
timber for
wasn't
sure. Yeah, I assume has
right. It
always
was
been, or for,
Yep.
for a long time it's been in some. I mean, trees have grown there.
Yep. Correct.
Yep, and even some mature areas were pastured at one time as well, and so a lot of seed,
Yes.
seed can get transferred by wildlife,
Yeah.
cattle,
Which this one was, Brandon. This clear cut had been. There's been cows in it.
Which is why I think you probably have a lot of multiflora and stuff in there.
Could be.
Absolutely. So yeah, managing invasives out of that specific a project like that, where right you don't have to plant something because it's not in a program requiring you to plant something.
Right.
So that would be number one, right? If it's signed up in a program, basically in order for them to pay you for that, they want to ensure that they're getting their money's worth, right? Like that the habitat, that it is going to be good habitat that is established there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of the projects we work on, right, are signed up into a program, and that program is most likely going to require some sort of seeding to ensure that that project establishes well.
Right.
But other projects that people are doing on their own, absolutely, you could spray, and the timing of your herbicide application. I know we've talked about that.
Yep.
Even your Illinois farm, cool season plants in general. But like I said, our biggest hurdle is to knock back our cool season grasses. They're going to green up start germinating, growing, greening up at like 45 degree, 50 degree soil temps, which happen, early March sometimes. I mean, we're just, as soon as the snow melts, if your yard's greening up, if you're driving by and road ditches are greening up, pastures are greening up, that's cool season. Those are get almost a 2-month head start on growth before your warm season plants even germinate and start to grow. So if those are growing so thick, right, it's a carpet taking up every inch of bare soil, they're going to just outcompete. You could have a lot of good species in there that just aren't allowed to grow because they're getting outcompeted by the cool season grasses. And that's one goal, right, is to just keep those out of there, because that carpet is not good for wildlife at the ground level, right? That's where our wildlife are utilizing, is ground level cover. Like fescue, smooth brome grass is another one that we deal with a little bit more. And you get down south and Bahia grass, there's stilt grass in wooded areas and everything. But all of these essentially cool season grasses are something that structure wise, they're not good for wildlife, especially, if we look to upland game birds like turkeys, pheasants, quail, grouse, even, rabbits. I mean, the benefit of kind of native prairie, what I like to tell people is, think of your field, a square field, and you've got a bunch of 5-gallon buckets out there, right? And you just place them, and almost no matter how many buckets you put out there, there's still going to be areas in between those buckets. So those buckets are kind of symbolizing our native plants, because the native warm season grasses and wildflowers are more clumps. So they're going to grow vertical, and then the root system is growing deeply into the ground. Sometimes over 10 foot deep, you will have root systems in the ground, and then that plant is growing up. It's a little bit tighter at where it comes right out of the ground at the base of it, and then as that plant kind of grows upward, it's going to branch out a little bit or lean, and then have basically overhead cover and then bare ground for wildlife to utilize. And especially, if we again go back to our birds, our ground nesting birds, turkeys, quail, pheasants,
Mm-hmm.
those are going to require that bare ground. That's part of the benefit of that
Mm-hmm.
structure is the openness at the ground level. Because when you think of, little chicks, quail chicks, pheasant chicks, the size of your thumb, trying to get through your yard. If you figured your yard
Yeah.
and let it grow to 4 inches, right? That a little
Can't do it.
chick can't get through there, and there's no food.
Mm-hmm.
That's something, when pollinator habitat came around, or the idea of pollinator, an actual program that was labeled as pollinator friendly plantings. The focus on that is the wildflower part of the mix, and less on the grasses. People again are like, why does Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever care about pollinators, right? But all those flowers attract insects. Insects are food for our upland game birds for sure. They're really eating the first couple months of their life, as far as chicks go. They're eating solely soft-bodied insects that those wildflowers are attracting. And then in the winter, once everything dries down, all of those produce seed as well, and that seed can be utilized for food as well. So it's kind of for our upland game birds for sure. Like a diverse mix is kind of its structure, its habitat, its food, all in one mix.
Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, hard to believe, but Deer Grow has been the sponsor that's been there since the beginning of the Hunter Podcast. Back in 2021, I think that they were the only partner that we had, but it's such a cornerstone brand and set of products for our food plot strategy throughout the year.
No doubt. And it seems like we used to have an off season, but not so much anymore. It's like when the hunting season ends, it really rolls right into food plot season, habitat projects, all of the above. And the Plot Start and Plot Boost have been there since the very beginning. That's a cornerstone for all of our plots. The Plot Start goes on at the beginning, Plot Boost goes on midway through. And since they came out with all of the fertilizers, that gets mixed in with the Plot Boost application as well. And I can't believe the results that we've been getting out of that.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Like I said, it's all the work now that really produces the results in the fall. So right now, anyone listening to Hunter Podcast can use code HUNTER, HUNTR, for 15% off any of the products at deergrow.com.
Better food plots, bigger deer. Let me ask you this just to establish a baseline understanding of, you've called them native grasses. Let's just say grasses. Specifically, we were just talking about your bunch grasses and stuff. Are all native grasses warm season grasses, or are there cool season native grasses as well?
There are some cool season native grasses as well, and they structure wise they will be a little bit more clump wise. They're not, and the clumps, the bare ground. That's what people don't necessarily like for grazing, because they assume there's not as much tonnage if it's not a complete carpet.
So there are native warm and cool season grasses. That makes sense. Are all warm season grasses native, or are there non-native warm season grasses?
There are non-native warm season grasses.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you give us some examples of those?
Johnson grass?
Yes, absolutely.
That's my nemesis.
For sure.
So it's a native, I've got some
information,
but it is your nemesis.
It's a non-native.
Oh, it's a non-native warm season grass.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so it's going to be growing, right? Actively growing at a time where, if you're trying to promote your native warm season grasses, then that it's hard to,
difficult
without
to manage.
spot spraying, treating those. It's harder. There are some herbicides. You can be strategic about it. I've actually got some information. I need to email you, Jeremy, about, just Johnson grass control, even in native habitat planting. So we can be strategic with some of that, right? Or just it takes a little bit more time, right? The focus would be spend some time before you plant something, right? It's not that you have to plant something to have good structure and good habitat. It's an easier way, right, to ensure that the plants that you want are out there. But in the time being, if you focus on that Johnson grass and just try to eliminate it as much as possible, even while allowing just some forbs, right, to grow.
Yep.
You could use grass selective herbicide for a little while.
Yep.
Plant clover in there for, temporary or something, and then come back and try to do something different in those areas.
So let me ask you this, Brennan. Do most parts of, let's say, the Whitetails Range, or even let's just say the Midwest and the Northeast, do all of those regions have native warm season grasses in the seed bank?
That is, that's tough. It should be there, right? Like, I mean, Illinois was pretty much a wet, tall grass prairie, for the most part. And seeds can sit in the seed bank, so in the soil, it's been documented over 100 years that a seed can sit in the soil, not germinating and growing, but then giving space and moisture and sunlight, it will grow. And that's where you see a lot of your, what a lot of people consider weeds. I always try to identify a weed as a plant out of place, because a lot of those can be native species that are growing. It's just we don't want them, and most of that ties back to agriculture, right? They don't want weeds in their fields. They don't want anything that's not a crop that they're trying to harvest, right? They're maximizing their bushels and everything that way. But especially if we're dealing with agriculture, right? It has been tilled. For the most part, I mean, everything has been heavily tilled for a number of years, and herbicides, pesticides. Yeah. It's not that, if you gave it time, if, you maybe could have some of those areas, and it's all going to be dependent on where that exact field is, and how it was managed, or how the surrounding area was managed. But for the most part, if you just let a field grow, it's going to turn to most likely non-natives and more invasive type. I mean, it'll be weedy at first. And then, we've even got, shrubs and trees like autumn olive and bush honeysuckle and, that stuff that it just, it usually is more aggressive. It doesn't have anything controlling it.
Yeah. It outcompetes the natives.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I guess the root of my question anyways is, like, we've seen a pretty stark difference between native warm season grass species in Illinois. It may be slightly skewed because we are in a CRP program, so some or all of that may have been planted at some point.
Probably.
And contrast that to any of our farms out east. I don't think Jeremy or I have...
I have some warm seasons in my Kentucky farm.
Native?
Yep, like Eastern Gamma grass and some Indian grass. Like, I don't necessarily think I had any native like switch or anything, but there definitely are some native bunch grasses that have come up in the pasture areas that I'm on year 5 essentially in those areas, and that was kind of the root going back to the Johnson grasses. Initially, I tried to convert some of that pasture to ag, and when I sprayed it with Glide to nuke it out, Johnson grass just exploded, like, up out of there. And so there were two areas that now I have set up an equip, or as part of my equip application, that essentially I've let go fallow for 5 years. Like, I've not herbicided them, I've not mowed them, I've done nothing. I've just literally let them go. They do have a very thick carpet of cool season grasses on them, which I would like to take out. My fear is that when I spray those out, Johnson grass is going to explode like it did before in those pieces. So, like, it's kind of a balancing act there. What I do have that I'm excited about is I have some warm season bunch grasses I see coming up in those areas. I also have a tremendous amount of like blackberry species. So from a woody browse, from, even for us, like going around and picking blackberries and stuff, like it's turning into what we call a lot of times like the rabbit cover of what I like to see from thick but space on the ground. So it's like
early successional growth.
Yeah. So obviously this year, or whenever this equip is planned, part of that is spraying with cleth to remove cool season grasses on that. Eventually, next year, getting ready to do the first burn on those fields as well. So, at some point, there will be some spraying that will happen, and whether Johnson grass starts to come up and I hit it again with a cleth, just trying to nuke it out of that soil bank. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to lose a lot of that browse species and stuff that's taken 5+ years to gain in those fields, right? Because that has cover and food value, in my opinion, for deer especially.
Yeah, and you can be targeted with some specific herbicides. I'm not gonna say I'm a herbicide expert by any means. Definitely lean on your local co-ops or herbicide, true herbicide experts in your areas. But like Plateau is a type of herbicide, actually a brand name, and I forget the active ingredient, but that's one that a lot of native grasses and wildflowers are tolerant to a certain amount of that per acre, where Johnson grass, again, more at a seedling stage, like not if it's fully mature, but more in that seedling stage, can be set back by that herbicide. So you can kind of be targeted, right? Especially if you know exactly what species you're trying to eradicate out of a field or kill. That's half the battle, is just trying to identify what's out there and then what's good, what's bad.
Right.
And so timing wise, like and the reason why probably your first spray didn't hurt the Johnson grass at all is because you sprayed early.
Yeah, it wasn't
grass,
there.
Right before the Johnson grass had started to germinate and grow. So you never really got any herbicide on the Johnson grass, and then it had plenty of space to just, boom. But you could have come back then and sprayed another month or two later to try to set the Johnson grass back. But the problem in a lot of those areas, and I mean, we definitely have Johnson grass here that we're dealing with in Illinois and in a lot of different states, but it's identifying that, because it is growing at the same time that a lot of our good stuff is, and so people. A lot of times it gets out of hand, or they don't know that it's bad until it's been there for a few years. If it's been there a few years, it's produced seed, for a few years that again, it grows so thick, and you could say, well, why is Johnson grass bad? Right. It really is more aggressive. It outcompetes, and it's not a good native species. It just basically takes over and doesn't allow our native species that are native wildlife, or wildlife in general are used to using or need, throughout their life cycle.
And I mean, that stuff comes up like where I sprayed. And again, I sprayed because at one point in time I thought I was going to put crops in that area, and I didn't eventually. So I basically sprayed and made all this room, but it came up so thick, and then like the first like hard rain windstorm that we had like in late summer, early fall, it just all lays like straight over. So like if you look out there, it's just, I mean, I couldn't even walk through it, let alone wildlife use it. Like it's just thick, 4 or 5 feet tall grass just like laid over.
Absolutely. And that, the structure, again, if there was more woody out there, I mean, the blackberries help hold some of that up, right? The having diversity in there helps hold cover up, and being a little bit more strategic about what plants you have in there. Especially standing up to snow, heavy wet rains and wind and everything that way. It's a lot of that stems back to just what species do you want to promote in there.
Yep.
Can we run through a species list here real quick?
Sure.
We'll just it'd be fun to just address some of these, and you can comment on any that you want.
I think before we go into that, just kind of rounding out that entire topic, I think that for me, and just, people listening, because I've had other people reach out, to your point, Brandon, I think jumping on it in the seedling stage is super critical. The more mature that those types of plants get, the harder they are to kill. and also probably expect some sacrifice in some of these years. Like, for instance, those fields that I haven't touched, and obviously I'm kind of waiting to get the equip plan all in place, but I haven't put any native warm seasons into those spots. There are some popping up, but like that's just what's in the seed bed. So I'm going to use those first few years of purely trying to control some of the invasives and non-natives. And then once those are as under the thumb as possible, establish those natives that I want in there, and then just manage it on that cycle. And obviously if it's cool seasons versus warm seasons, there's a little bit easier management there than like a Johnson grass, where I'm trying to manage that within the same time I'm trying to establish a native warm season. So
they're tough to get a handle on, man. It's like once you dig into a project, you get excited about, I'm gonna plant this or that. Then you start realizing, I have all these, non-desirables here. I have this stuff in the seed bag. I have all these things to contend with. You're like, then you start having to involve all these different like chemical or mechanical methods of dealing with what's there to get it back to a clean slate, so that you can just start the multi-year process of getting what you want incorporated.
For sure,
it's a lot.
It is. It's not easy, and it is something you have to stay on top of. So it's not if you just walk away for 4 years and you come back and then you look at it and you're like, oh, that was a problem. Well, that was probably a problem year one, and you've let it 4 years, establish and produce seed. Which the seed bank is also one of those things that, back to education, right? It just, killing every plant that's growing out there at a certain time is, depending on if it's a bad plant, right? Then that's good. That's great. But if you just leave it and don't do anything else, the seed bank is what's going to grow, right? The seed that's been in there. And if that species has been there for multiple years, it's produced seed, and that seed is sitting there waiting for that open space, the moisture, the sunlight to be able to germinate and grow. So many people just like even say to establish a food plot or a planting, a native habitat planting. I'll hear someone, say that they sprayed to kill everything, right? Then they went through and worked the ground, and then they planted their seed. And it makes me cringe, because when you work the ground, all you're doing, you just reseeded everything that had been there prior, that you killed all the mature plants, right, that were green and growing. But then you just ultimately, by working it, reseeded, brought all that seed that might have been buried, 2 inches that couldn't grow. Now you brought it to the top. It's going to get the sunlight, the moisture, and grow. And so I'm always,
let me ask
the longer
you this,
you can put off.
Let me ask you this on that topic, though, because I think there's some different methodologies around. And so I know you're not a farmer, correct? You don't farm agriculture?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So I don't expect you to know the answer to this question, but for us just all to debate on here, why do farmers till their fields? Why do they do that?
So a lot of it is to dry out fields. So they
dry
want
out
that the darker soil to attract the sunlight, to help dry things out. Also, tilling does kill weeds. I mean, working the ground,
the mechanical version.
Yep. When you pop a plant, pull the roots out of the ground, then it dries out and dies. So that is a lot of what their reasoning is for working the ground.
It also depends, like if they're actually like chisel plowing to break up like any kind of hard pans and stuff like that from a root system.
Okay.
So you have that.
And breaking up residue,
exactly,
from the previous crop and everything that way. So
from a weed management standpoint, would it not be an effective strategy? And it was always my understanding that this is why they did this, is they're continuously turning over the seed bed to do those things that you mentioned, but also to go ahead and allow for new seed to germinate and to grow so that they can kill it again. And it's just a contiguous process. Like over time, can you not eliminate a seed bed by turning it over and killing it?
So that's a question we get a lot with people not wanting to use herbicides, whether it's organic or just personal reasons. They just don't want to use herbicides, and so
I think you still have to use the herbicide, right? You still have to kill it and then turn it over.
Well, so I would say you wouldn't need the herbicide in the first place if you're going to turn it over, because
Okay.
your herbicide's only, unless it's got residual, and if we're dealing with ag, that's a completely it's a completely different ball game, because they've got a number of herbicides designed to basically kill everything that is not the crop that they want, and
Right.
there's a lot of research and money towards that is out there. So when I talk to people that just would rather not use herbicides, right, for site prep for a planting, the idea, yes, would be to work the ground. So not using any herbicide, work the ground, depending on what's there right now. Like if it's a thick sod bound root system, which basically has roots really dense, really thick, the top say 2 inches of the soil. Then I'm going to recommend the first time you work the ground, you need to go at least below all of that root structure that is currently there with the plants that are growing there right now. So say that's 4 inches deep. Someone takes a disc or a tiller or something that way and works the ground 4 inches deep. That did kill the plants that were growing, right? It should kill them as long as the roots get popped out of the ground. It will kill the mature plants that were out there right now. It also did bring seed up that is going to try to establish. It's going to germinate and grow because it's got, again, the sunlight, moisture, and just space on the ground to grow. So what I would recommend is it's going to be multiple applications of working the ground, but as you get closer to the time you're wanting to plant, I would work shallower and shallower each time. So if that first time you work the ground at 4 inches deep, then maybe the next time you're working at 2 inches deep, and then you're working at 1 inch deep, and then kind of just scratching the top. But what you have to do is allow those seeds to germinate, basically be a plant, right? Try to start establishing roots, and then the next time you work them, you're killing those plants. So you're trying to exhaust as much of the seed in the seed bank as you can. And that's where, I tell people it's not something where you would be able to start right now, in April and say, I'm going to work the ground once and then plant before June and be fine. Like it's kind of, you got to give the plants, the seeds, time to germinate and grow before you can kill them. So it's a longer process. A lot of times I recommend those projects kind of work the ground or keep it worked throughout an entire summer, an entire growing season, just kind of every 3-4 weeks, once a month or something going through. And like I said, you want to go shallower and shallower so you're not bringing up as much additional weed seed or just seed.
So, and to clarify for some guys, you can go out and spray right now and then go turn the soil and plant and have success growing a crop that way, but you're going to expect to, when you tilled it, you exposed weed seed. So expect to have to address those, out of your crop. So if you're planting clover right now, you're going to have to spray later in the year.
Absolutely. So I always recommend multiple applications prior to planting if possible. Sure. And I mean, going back to it, fall time frame is, especially for cool season, I mean, any plant right before it goes dormant, right? It's gonna in the winter time. So for cool seasons, a lot of times it's November, late October, early November is usually a good time to try to spray. And what you're doing is you're killing that plant, or you're putting the herbicide on there where the plant is going to draw it down into the root system and then basically die, over when it'll die. In the fall, plants don't turn as brown as quickly. Like you may not notice it as much. It may just look like they go dormant right as it cools off, but those plants will never green back up in the spring. Contrast that with spring spraying. In the springtime, all the root reserves from a plant, they're pushing those out into the leaves of the plant, just like a tree. Everything, it was dormant, no growth, and now it's pushing everything out. So when you spray with herbicide in the spring, you tend to, I mean, definitely, use a surfactant, use the labeled, mixture that you need to get your best kill. but that plant is kind of pushing the herbicide out at the same time, not really drawing it into the root system. So a lot of times, again, depending on what plants are there, but cool season grasses are kind of the main focus I'm always talking to people about. But a lot of times it may take a couple sprays to actually kill those cool season grasses in the spring versus the fall.
The Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt.
Should be no surprise to anyone listening to this that back with Hoyt another season. I'm actually going to be shooting the AX2 aluminum this year.
You traitor.
But you're still going RX9.
Yeah, blacked
carbon,
out as always.
Blacked out.
Yeah.
Big surprise for
80
everyone.
pounds. Big surprise. Yeah.
But seriously, man, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Every year it seems like we get a new Hoyt bow in our hands, and they're always a step above the last and just a step above everybody else.
Yeah, they're so consistent, man. Just their processes get better, every year. And we've really been excited about, as we've grown with Hoyt, we've brought some others in with us. And we just feel like the Hoyt family is growing, like the community, and we're really excited about the people that are involved, excited to be a part of that company. And it's really awesome.
So for anyone that's excited about Hoyt like Jared and I are, you can use the code HUNTER, HUNTR, on Hoyt.com.
Get serious, get Hoyt. Well, this clear cut project in Ohio has been a good learning curve, and it's a good one at my current state of knowledge of how these types of projects kind of go, because we're assessing in real time, what's there to start with. In our case, there are cool season grasses, and there is a heavy layer of thatch in a clear cut that I would like to retain structure and long-term convert into a more favorable, just overall habitat situation. Right? I wanted it to be I want it to be thick deer habitat. I want that to be that. So, what we've done so far is we've just understood that, hey, this is dominated by cool season grasses here. These need to be dealt with. There is a thick layer of thatch, so there will be no successful planting into this. Maybe if we were to drill or something, but we can't. It's a clear cut. There's structure and down tree tops and stuff everywhere, so can't do it. And there's ditches and stuff. So what we've done so far is we've sprayed it with glyphosate and a surfactant, just a crop oil.
That was in late March.
Yeah, late March, and those greens were popping. I could see that was happening while we were in there cutting out the rest of the non-desirable trees that were left after the clear cut. And so we went and sprayed those with a drone, and I went and checked on those yesterday, and I think that we're having some success. So either they're dying, it's not completely brown, but they're dying and or severely stunted at this point. So now we're left with, there's this heavy layer of thatch, all this stuff here. So that's where I went yesterday. I pulled 400 yards of fence line out from under trees that had fallen and crazy multiflora and stuff. It was just really a job. Tomorrow we have the skid steer coming with the forestry mulcher to clean that up, come behind us, establish a clean fire break. I'm going to immediately plant that. I'm going to just broadcast clover. It should rain that night, so that's a good case for that. And the next step is to burn it off. We're going to burn all that thatch off, and we're getting ready to order some seed from you guys and that's what we talked about this morning. I think once it's burned, we're going to wait maybe 2 weeks and see what comes back. I expect it probably will be pretty heavily influenced by cool season grasses. So I think regardless of what comes back forb-wise or perennial-wise, we're still going to probably have to spray that. And Brandon, maybe I'll take your recommendation as to whether that's a gly or more of a grass selective, like a clethodim when the time comes. And then regardless, we're going to then broadcast that seed mix into this entire clear cut with hopes of reestablishing that.
Absolutely. And that just goes back to the site prep is one of the biggest parts of whether you're going to have a successful planting establishment in the future or more easily successful planting. The more site prep, I understand everyone wants everything, I want it planted and established right now. But if you only go do half of the work for site prep and then you plant, you're just setting yourself up for failure or for just more work down the road. So the more you can clean that up first beforehand, one, you're going to give your seeding a better chance, right? Because you're eliminating that competition. But then also in your future years, it's just going to be easier for you to manage if it's not starting off already half cool season grasses.
Well, I think I learned my lesson on like the initial, a couple of years ago, we had those conversations with Sturgis and Harper and stuff. And I tried that on some pastures and stuff. And I would say those projects after 5 years now were a failure because I didn't continue to manage the cool season grasses out of them. I had 1 or 2 years of like perennial explosion or annual explosion. Your goldenrods and pokeberries and stuff like that. It was cool, but now it's just all reverting to cool season. So I don't want to make the same mistake in this clear cut here. So like I was kind of getting ready to half-ass it, not intentionally, but like I was like, well, I'll just spray it in March and hope that whatever is there will come back. But what I learned from the first lesson is like it's going to just revert to fescue. It's not going to be what I want in the end. So that's when we started looking at the burn. That's when we started looking at replanting, more favorable species here, all the above. So, and when I looked at it, the next step there was I was like, well, I'll just spray it and then I'll broadcast this mix into it. That'll help. Like I'll get some of this in. But when I looked at it, like even yesterday, I was like, there's no soil here at all. It's completely, the only soil that would be exposed is like in that multiflora that maybe we've killed. Right. Everything else is dense, cool season thatch. So.
Yep. And that's where that burn really helps with just expose, especially for a broadcast seeding, right? We want at least 50% bare ground, whenever we would recommend a broadcast seeding. So you're going to remove thatch. You're also anything that you didn't, hurt with the herbicide, maybe there were some misses or whatever, but burning something that's green right now will help set it back. It's probably not going to kill a thick cool season, patch or something that way, especially fescue. But the timing of all that, right? The closer to April, I try to get people to hold off and burn. You can burn in January, February time frame, but for the most part, you're promoting grasses for sure. The earlier you burn like that, you're promoting cool season grasses. You've basically just set the stage for them to have a very easy time to grow. Yeah.
All right. Well, here, Brandon.
So you got a 1-2 punch.
I'm going to rip through this seed prescription that we have here, and maybe you can help me if I'm reading this correctly. So at the very high level, it looks like we have 35.42% grasses going into this thing and 64.58% flowers.
Yep.
Okay. And then you have some things mentioned below, but I'm reading off like the PLS percentage, what does that stand for?
Yeah, PLS stands for pure live seed.
Pure live seed.
So that's the difference in.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So that's the difference in like bulk seed. If you were buying bulk seed, and you get, say it's 10 pounds, and it's bulk seed, the pure live seed amount in that is based on the purity and germination rates and all that stuff. But it may only be 6 pounds of pure live seed in a 10-pound bulk bag. Yep. And it just depends on what it is. It may have a coating on it, it may, that's attributing to the weight, or things that way. But so all of our seed mixes online or like quotes or anything that way, when it says like half a pound, it's pure live seed. So you'll get more seed than that, cause rarely is anything 100%, pure live seed. So whenever you get the seed, the bulk seed rate will be different, but when we design everything, it's pure live seed. And then those percentages are based on, at the seeds per square foot, of each species. So whenever it's a calculation, right? Once there's a certain number of seeds per pound of each species. And then, there's everywhere from thousands of seeds per pound to there's some species that there's millions of seeds per pound of seed. So to talk kind of apples to apples, when we design and look at seed mixes, we're looking at more the seeds per square foot. So when we
Yep.
plant at that rate per acre, how many seeds are going to be in a square foot?
Okay, so and with grass at 35.42%, the seeds per square foot is 16.112. And that this is just bulk numbers here at the very top. And then with 64% 0.58 flowers, that's 29.374 seeds per square foot. Okay, and we'll post this too. I think Nick can overlay this on the video just so people can see the thing here. The things that don't seem to be a part of your pure live seed percentage is below. You have listed some forbs and legumes.
Yeah, so those are part of that. Those are just listed out as so the legume part of it. A lot of seed mixers require a certain number of legumes, so that they are still forbs and they are still in that upper amount. Okay. Those are just showing which of those are forb legumes out of that mixture.
Okay, cool. How do you want to do this, Brandon? You want me to just rip through and read every one real quick, or
there is a lot. I know that mix
is a big list.
Oh, it's not that
highly
many.
Diverse mix.
Yeah,
but and the grasses, I think we were at how many total grasses did it say up there on top as far as species?
10 grasses 10 species of grasses, 32 species of flowers. Yeah,
absolutely. So
yeah, I'm gonna rattle them off, and then we'll go back if there's any that you feel are like worth mentioning.
Okay.
Because it's kind of cool here. So these are all your common names, and I don't know what some of these are, but number one, bent grass or autumn, blue stem or big, blue joint grass, switchgrass. In parentheses, we have Blackwell, little blue stem. That's Aldous, tall composite drop seed. And maybe I'm reading some of these wrong or out of order or something, but purple top tridents, Indian grass, switchgrass of the Forestburg variation, and then switchgrass of the Canlow variation, partridge pea, alfalfa in parentheses VNS, Alsike clover, crimson clover, Dutch white clover, Ladino white clover, yarrow, swamp milkweed, common milkweed, lance leaf coreopsis, plains coreopsis, purple coneflower, false sunflower, great blue lobelia, wild lobelia, wild bergamot, bergamot, I don't know. Common primrose, stiff goldenrod, foxglove, beard tongue, narrowleaf mountain mint, mountain mint, prairie coneflower, gray-headed coneflower, black-eyed Susans, cup plant, gray goldenrod, heath aster, smooth blue aster, New England aster, hoary vervain, yellow wingstem, and Culver's root.
Yeah. So very highly diverse.
42
mix.
different species. Yep.
Sounds like a Harry Potter mixture.
Yeah. The hair of a giant.
Right. The names are very, very confusing. But I mean, when you look at those different species, a lot of them are, so there's blooming windows, and this is where kind of the pollinator projects with CRP specifically. So USDA came out with a pollinator program, and so then they defined what USDA wants as pollinator habitat. There's 3 blooming windows. So there's an early blooming window, a mid blooming window, and a late blooming window. And that is kind of our growing season throughout our growing season. So say earlies are going to be kind of the late May, June timeframe. Mids are going to be kind of late June, July timeframe, and lates are going to be August, September timeframe, as far as just general ideas, as far as those separations, as far as what species are blooming when. So specifically, this was a non-program, right? So there
Right.
really were no parameters that we had to
Right.
stay within or had to meet with this. Um, but but yeah, the structure of those different plants, they're all, so some of those I guess are technically biannuals, but for the most part perennials, right? The 90% of those are perennials, so they are going to take a little bit longer to establish, right? I always tell people, and I think you mentioned before, we talked about like the sleep, the creep, and the
Yep.
leap as far as the first 3 years. But they're focused on putting a root structure down before ever really growing much above ground. A lot of
Okay.
times, the first year planting, you're going to end up with maybe 6 inches, maybe a foot tall cover. I mean, growth on those seedlings. There are some more annual biannuals in there that are there for quick establishing. So they establish from seed a little bit quicker. And so those are in there. They're not necessarily going to be in there maybe on year 10 without some management and everything that way. But they're there for kind of quick establishing placeholders while the rest of your seed mix is getting established.
Can you give us just a brief visualization? Like, have you seen this mix planted, and like, what did it look like in year 1, 2, and like 3, let's say?
Yeah, so we definitely have
not every specific plant. I know there's a lot in there, but just what's right. It going to look like in year 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, so the coreops and that Ohio is one even in program acres where like, so those clover alfalfa, right? Like those are not in all mixes. Those are kind of additive, especially from a deer standpoint, right? Having some browse in that area and everything. Those are going to be a little bit quicker establishing as well. Those clovers. A lot of times it's, if something is going to bloom first year, it is going to be probably partridge pea, black-eyed Susan, some of the coreopsis in there. Those are all, actually all three of those are yellow flowers.
Okay.
But for the most part, you will have, I tell people all the time, again, that seed bank, about no matter how many times you spray, you're still going to have some very common, quote, weeds that are going to show up in there: foxtail, ragweed, mare's tail, those type of plants that are just in the seed bank. They're quick establishing. They're annuals. They grow, mature, die all in 1 year. Compared to our perennials that are like, hey, I have to survive here forever, essentially. But I need to get a good base, a good root system established before I put much energy into growing above ground.
Right.
So I get calls all the time. First year, it may be July, August, even after, someone planted in the spring. In July, August, they're calling and it's a failure. I don't see anything growing that I can identify. I always try to prepare people for the worst, and hope for the best. But ultimately, you may not have any flowers or seed heads, right? A grass is going to produce a seed head. That's easily identifiable, right? But you may not have any of that the first year, the first growing season. So a lot of times we may recommend a companion crop. That can be oats, a lot of times for program acres. If you're doing a program, planting just oats, seed oats, to actually basically take up space, compete with some weed pressure, and just allow your seed mix time. It's an annual that's going to germinate, grow, mature, produce seed, die all in 1 year versus your perennials. And then second year for sure, you should see those yellow flowers like I talked about, the partridge pea, which is a small yellow flower, but it also it kind of looks like a honey locust leaf. It's a leaf with small leaflets on it. So even as a seedling, it's an easily identifiable one if you know what you're looking for. And black-eyed Susan, the leaves are going to be real velvety, real kind of hairy, velvety, soft, if you actually reach down and touch them. But by year 2, you should start to see some of those quicker establishing early wildflowers. And you're also kind of just looking for that clump structure, right? Overall, these are going to be clump plants. So just look, it's going to grow out of a central clump. In the first year, that clump may only be, a couple inches, because again, it's focused on putting a root system down.
Mm-hmm.
By year 2, then, maybe your 4-inch, 6-inch clumps potentially. And then you could start to see those flowers. But even, black-eyed Susan, is one, or purple cone flower, right, is planted in landscapes a lot. And you may see like a clump of black-eyed Susan that has 20 to 40, flowers, stems, and with flowers blooming on it. That's a mature plant. Like second year, you might have a couple black-eyed Susan little flowers come up out of the ground, and actually produce a flower, right, to
Mm-hmm.
where it's got petals on it and everything that way. Year 3 is when it really it shines as far as being able to identify the plants that are out there.
Yeah.
And throughout a mix, like there are even, like I said, the bloom period, early, mid, and late, there are quick establishing plants. They're kind of, which would be like years 1 to 3. There are 3 to 5 year plants that kind of, they take a little while. They're there, right? But they may not produce a flower, or may not be easily identifiable until year 3 to 5. And then even some that take, 7 years to actually bloom. Like they'll
Right.
be in there. And then 1 year, someone will be like, oh man, like that, the Culver's root was crazy this year, or something that way. And a lot of it is going to be based on, even from year to year, some of your blooms are going to change. If it's a wet year versus a dry year, you're going to have more of your wetter species, that are doing better on a wetter year versus dry. And so you just may see more of those. But the planting itself is ever changing. Like even in a mature planting, when I go out and evaluate or take a look at these projects, you could go out there 1 week and, say early on, I've seen like foxglove beard tongue, which is a little white flower, tubular type flower. And the whole field will just be white with foxglove beard tongue. And then you go out there 2 weeks later and lance leaf coreopsis, which is, basically a yellow flower. It's got more of like an orangish center to it, but a yellow flower. It may be like blooming like crazy just 2 weeks later. And the foxglove beard tongue, yeah, there may be some of it, but not nearly what it was the 2 weeks prior. Yeah. So it's ever changing, even during the growing season.
Will any of those flowers, Brennan, persist into deer season?
For the most part. So again, warm season, right? The cool season, some of those, like your clovers and stuff that way, like those are going to be actively growing in the cool season window. But your warm season will go dormant essentially when that soil temperature starts to decrease. When it gets below that 60, 65 degrees, you're going to start seeing those plants go dormant. So basically everything from above ground, the green of the plant is going to be taken down into the root system, and everything above ground is going to die off. And so it's there, and that's thatch, right? That's cover. That's absolutely for over winter, right? The dead material is still great cover. But the life of that plant is below ground in the root system at that point.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful mix, like especially during the summer. It's like visually pleasing to look at,
Probably good fawning cover too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like that's, when we talk about, specifically, right, deer usage and everything that way, I do tend to, try to let people know, like there's specific times that I think deer will utilize these fields more. And definitely that fawning time frame, which, we don't always think about as hunters, right? We're really focused on that in-season time frame. But anytime you can improve your habitat, it's going to improve your populations, just the health of your deer herd and everything that way. So yeah, great fawning habitat for sure during the summer.
Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Bushnell.
Man, what an iconic brand. I mean, I vividly remember growing up, it seemed like every serious deer hunter had a Bushnell pair of binoculars or a Bushnell rifle scope. You knew that those guys were serious about what they were about to go with if they were packing the Bushnell stuff.
No doubt, man. I remember Bone Collector guys and so many others that we've respected over the years. It's always been like your grandpa's rifle scope. And since then, obviously, they've developed so many great products. We're rocking the R series of binoculars this year. I believe it's the R5 10x42s. Those have been awesome. We took those to TAC a couple weeks ago, along with the Broadhead rangefinder. It's got a ton of technology packed into it for angles and for bow hunters ultimately. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things, we've talked about this with a lot of the brands we're working for, is we want high quality gear that's affordable, and that's exactly what Bushnell's trying to position here. They want to make really good gear that anyone that's serious about deer hunting can afford. And so most of those R5 series binos that we're talking about are under $300 for unbelievable glass.
No doubt. And so for right now, you can use code HUNTER, HUNTR, to get a discount on the Bushnell website. That's bushnell.com. Well, what do you think, Brandon, about this clear cut obviously has a lot of structure in it that I assume even after we burn through it, a lot of that is going to remain. And really my hope is that this will support, deer during the deer season as well. Do you think that it will do that on its own, or do you think I should consider going into some of those more structured pockets and just broadcasting, maybe a higher concentration of switchgrass or something right in those little pockets?
Yeah, I absolutely think your deer will utilize this. I love some of those drone studies or just the drone applications. In Illinois, we can't use them to look for wildlife even,
right.
But some of that would be try that out yourself, right? If you can get the drone up there and just try to take, depending on your state regulations or whatever.
Well, we definitely can in Ohio. But I can just land the drone and then go shoot them.
Right.
In Ohio, there's nothing. Yeah.
But I mean, as far as use goes, it's structure, it's diversity. Nowhere in nature really are you going to find a monoculture of anything that wasn't man introduced,
right.
Again, invasives, not non-native invasives specifically, but even just solid monoculture plantings. I don't know why specifically a deer, why would they use that? Unless, for very specific time frames, I guess maybe they would need to use that, but why not provide them more diversity? The structure, the difference in height. I mean, some of those grasses can be 5 to 7 foot tall. Some of those grasses are going to be 1 to 3 foot tall at full maturity. So that just the difference in height and everything even adds to that structural diversity within that planting. And then you've already got, you're going to have, from your clear cut, even you're going to have some of that woody debris that's even after a burn, you're not going to burn up all of that. So that again when you think about bedding, even in the timber, right, they want to be able to bed down and see, if they can see as much as possible, wind, of course, hear and smell, as much as possible and feel safe. So that cover is going to be, when they stand up, they should be able to basically scan through that. But then when they bed down, when they lay down, they disappear in that.
Yeah.
And just from feedback from our biologists, that are even doing more, say for program acres, right? They're doing spot checks or status reviews. And I've talked to them, right? We've got biologists across states on a lot of acres, walking a lot of acres, and they'll make note or tell me, that the more diverse a planting is, the more sign, that they're seeing, specifically from deer, right? It's easier to see deer sign. But the more sign they see in those fields, the higher diversity it is. The lower diversity stuff, they're deer, there's deer sign in there, but, not near as much as those more diverse areas. Well,
I'm really excited about this area just because I think from a topography standpoint, they they feel really safe there. It's kind of a peninsula. It's 12 acres, to start with. So it's plenty big, and it's surrounded by on most upwind sides, 3 sides at least, crop fields. And so I think that by establishing this blend, I do think I'm going to go into some of those more structured pockets and just throw a little bit heavier on the switch. I might even do that this weekend, like immediately after the burn. And then we'll top dress it all with the correct planning at the time. And I bet they will use the crap out of it. I bet they'll have like 5, 10, 15 like little bedrooms kind of throughout the thing where the structure's at and where the topography is to their advantage. And then everything else in between, all the filler will be this awesome, diverse mix. And then we already talked about the perimeter of this thing. I'll plant to a kind of a hard edge of switch to really wrap it in. So, well, last thing on that one, on this area, Brandon, then we can kind of move on, is what does management of this look like from a spraying standpoint? So like we're killing cool season grasses out of the gate. By the end of this year, coming into next year, we have cool season grasses popping up through this mix. How do we address that?
So depending on how bad it is, or if it's a targeted area, smaller areas, you could backpack spray or like, I guess maybe even with a drone, if you could identify those areas, like only spray the parts of areas that are.
It'll be the whole thing, I'd imagine. If it's there, it'll be fairly contiguous.
Yeah. So then you're just looking at timing, right? Whenever those native warm season plants are dormant, then herbicide is not. Unless it's got a strong residual. Herbicide's not going to hurt those plants at all when they're dormant. So cool season, if you're doing it at a time that the cool season then is actively growing, so November, December even. There've been windows in late December even, right, where we've got 50-degree days, sunny 50-degree days, and you'll see cool seasons just kind of, they're at their best, right? In that 50-degree window.
So everything is dormant in that mix at that time? Like you just hit it with a glide, or do you have to go like a grass selective when the warm season grasses are dormant?
Yeah, so that's going to be, so like in that mix specifically, right, there's some clovers in that are cool season. So if you sprayed with glide, you're going to kill or hurt, right? You set back any of those at that same time.
Right.
So I would recommend, if the cool season grasses, right? If your issue is a cool season grass, then absolutely I'd stick with a grass selective herbicide for those additional applications.
Can you be effective? And I know you said you're not an herbicide specialist, but can you be effective with something like clethodim, like a grass selective, during a not peak growing month like October, November, December?
Which for
October,
cool season,
maybe. Once you get to that November, December, even the cool seasons are not active, so they're not going to take up your clethodim.
Well, he was just saying that they might be.
December.
That's
frozen.
a very December, not really.
Yeah, fine. That's an extreme example.
Window, yeah, your key window would be late October, early November. About rut time frame.
Well, what about even, and it's more likely late March, early April. That's fine too, right?
Yeah. So early March at first green up, right? If it's greening up and it's grass, then it's active. It's actively growing.
The majority of that mix, including the flowers, is warm season based, right? Like obviously the clovers and stuff would be the cool season aspect of that.
Correct.
So and I guess if you miss the window, like you could effectively, and you'd have to look exactly, but like a plateau-esque type herbicide would likely be able to be used to control broadleafs and grasses that are undesirable in those mixes.
Correct. Yep. And you just want to identify, again, the biggest thing is if you can identify what grasses or forbs, broadleafs are your issue, then it's try to tailor your herbicide, make sure it's recommended for those, right? Or that it will work on those. And then between your timing and or the specialized herbicides that you could spray probably anytime, you can be strategic about that.
I'll tell you what would be helpful along with like for any seed dealer kind of a thing, is along with your seed blend, is to say, hey, based on the seed blends that are in here, these are your herbicide applications, and put your disclaimer on there, like obviously consult a local co-op or whatever, but
or if you can even use it based on so many states have herbicide regulations,
right? But to say, hey, here's the active ingredient that is effective at managing this seed blend, period.
Yeah, it's a lot harder because a lot of times each blend is different, right, on what it contains. A lot easier for food.
Well, I know, but you're leaving it to me to figure out.
Oh yeah, but no, and so some of the information I sent you, we have documents on our website. That resources available for people to download and kind of reference, and it has a lot of that information as far as timing, and maybe not specific, but we can build mixes, right? I've built mixes that are plateau tolerant mixes, or milestone is another herbicide where it'll be like a milestone tolerant mix. If you know ahead of time that you're going to have these issues that you want to control. And overall, once it gets established, again, these are deep-rooted perennials for the most part. Even a full application of glyphosate on an established prairie, you're not going to completely wipe out every plant out of there.
Right.
A lot of them might be stunted. You might kill some clumps, but essentially, that may be what you have to do in some instances. There's a lot of instances where we're trying to go back and thin out a thick grass stand to add that diversity, or to get that mix or field to have more diversity, is we're trying to set back some of the warm season grasses specifically. Usually your grasses are more aggressive just overall, and your tall grasses are the most aggressive of the grasses. But yeah, we've gone in and even growing season fires and growing season applications of clethodim or grass selective herbicide after a burn. And a mature prairie, we've maybe set it back 40 to 50% as far as of those clumps not germinating, not growing the next year. But also you got to think every year that those plants were mature, they drop seed right there, as part of the seed bank. Those plants, those seeds are also there to start to germinate and grow right back. So even if you would happen to kill, everything or 90% of the plants for some reason, whatever you sprayed or whatever, there's usually a good seed bank there as long as it's been established. If it was the first, 2 to 3 years, then maybe not as much, right? Like you've killed most of it before it's been able to produce a lot of seed in that area. But yeah, a lot of the management when it comes to this is once it's established, just don't use kid gloves. Because they're deep rooted and that root structure. I've had people try to kill warm season grasses in the spring again, or set them back, right, to add diversity. They want to put more forbs, more wildflowers in the mix. And spraying in the spring, it stunted the grasses. Like, say they had 16 to 18 inches, 2 foot of green growth on that plant, sprayed it with a full rate of Roundup, and it yellowed it stunted it for a couple of weeks, and then you went back out there in July and you couldn't tell that they sprayed it at all. Thinking about that, right, it was those were tall grasses, so they definitely had a deeper root system, but they whenever you sprayed them at only a couple foot, they have all that below the root reserve below that they can just grow right back out of it. It's not really absorbing it into the root system at that time, compared to like an August time frame, August, September growing season.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, man,
there's a lot there.
It's the hardest part, and it's kind of goes back, I think, into some of the thought process and things that you've been doing on your farm and people listening to this, and part of it's the food plot or crop mindset is that I'm going to plant something, and then next year or even this year, it's visibly like, there it is. Like, I've accomplished my goal, right? And that's what we get out of a food plot or farming or whatever it is. And from a habitat side, whether we're talking about pure fields or timber stand improvement or whatever it might be, is it's a slow process. And
years.
It's years. And that's so hard for so many of us because whether we bought a farm, and we know that it's a limiting factor that we have to do, and or it's just the patience of owning something or leasing something and knowing that it may take 5 years to establish this thing to getting to where it needs to be, and then 2 years later I've got to burn it and reset it all back again. Like there's this massive kind of turmoil I think we all deal with wanting overnight or instant success that just it doesn't happen, And if it's not done right, you wait 4 or 5 years and then you're like, oh.
Well, and the hardest part that I've found it, like there's almost, you have two realms of like wildlife management and or like hunting strategy, like setting up a farm. The hardest part for me is like executing some of this plan and trying to tie that into what does that mean for this overall scheme here 5 to 10 years down the road. Now, how does this all fit in? And then if I learn something from a hunting standpoint, I'm like, oh, they use it this way. Like, and this is like the nature of the farm. I want to build it in the grain of that, not against the grain. So is this whole field that I planted a switchgrass, or is this whole food plot that I planted in this direction, does that screw me for this whole, the way that I'm setting this up? I've changed multiple times. We've owned this farm now for 10 years, maybe more. And it's taken me 10 years now to land on the one spot or a couple of spots that I feel will be by the most effective, from a hunting strategy standpoint. So then I have to back out and say, okay, what have I done to this point to help or hurt that? And do I pivot at a certain point? And so those are the things that keep me up at night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the hardest stuff because long-term plans on a farmer are I think fewer and fewer, moving forward, meaning like if it's to think long-term like that, it's the farm. It's a forever farm basically. And I would say that most people are on a farm that's either a transition farm and or they're not sure if it's the long-term farm. And so those are the hard ones to determine, like, what should I be doing on here to get results? Because, if it doesn't work out, like, I'm moving on.
Yeah, it's these are long-term projects, right? And that's the hardest. It's not immediate results. It's very hard to have that mindset, but it's a bit added benefit to hopefully the next landowner as well, especially if it's a program, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing with programs. I want people to know that there are options out there, right, to help you as a landowner to establish and manage, even your timber aspect, like through Equip, and just to do these projects to kind of accomplish your hunting goals as well. Like, you can be very strategic with a lot of these programs as far as where they're at, whether it's around the outside of a field, strips through a field, whole fields. You can establish trees and shrubs in these food plot acres and some of these. And there's always the options of, leaving some areas out of CRP or programs that you want a bigger food plot or something that way. So it is long-term though. We like to think about that. These are long-term benefits. They do require yearly maintenance and management, but to maintain, their benefit and everything that way. But you can really change a property overall with any of this habitat work.
I don't think you go wrong with buying a farm that has great habitat. Even if there's like no hunting infrastructure, there's no, there's no food plots, there's no established access kind of a thing. Like, that all is very doable. And it's actually not that hard.
The food plot stuff for sure. Access, I mean, the farms, it at least needs to have the potential for the right access.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. But what I mean, I guess, is opposed to a farm that has very little habitat, and whether it's
habitat's hard,
poorly managed timber or pastures that are nothing, depending on your soil type, you can see different rates of success or recovery from that. But like, it's taken us a long time to get to the point where we're, addressing, and who knows, had I known everything that I know now about EQIP and CRP projects and how all these things all work, then like I could have applied that to our farm 10 years ago, and we'd be like living in the heyday. But like, it took us a long time to learn that, as opposed to if we bought a farm that had world-class habitat, I could establish all those other things in a year.
Yeah.
Like that.
I agree. No, I agree. Yeah. And I personally would rather have a poorly managed timber farm than a pasture farm. I think it's extremely hard to establish cover versus improve cover.
Yeah. Okay. Which is interesting, because like I've heard other guys say, and maybe they're more your Higgins types. They're more like advocates of your CRPs and warm seasons, who would say I prefer, but I think I'm more with you. I think you're gonna have a much easier time creating quality habitat out of timber, ideally with as few invasives as possible, because that's the time frame restriction. But yeah, dude, you freaking cut some trees down. Like, you got deer habitat.
You have deer habitat. Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit more immediate, right? Timber work, you can have that effect. And I mean, I do think, from a deer standpoint, it takes a few years for them to change, or even like for the fawns to then grow up. So like, I talk to people, I don't think they're immediately just going to change their bedding areas, right? They may start trying to figure out different areas of bedding, but if your deer are mainly bedding in your timber right now and you add a big, field of CRP, I don't think they just automatically pick up and say, oh, now we're bedding here. It takes time for them to kind of get used to those changes on a farm as well. And maybe it's those fawns, actually, once they get into that older, they utilize those a little bit different than the current deer you have are.
Sure.
Yeah, there's definitely an element to, like, deer in a certain area are just, whether it's their DNA, it's just their instinct to be in a certain habitat type. So like, there's deer in western Kansas that live in ditches and rows, and like, that's just their thing. That's just what they do. But I would say whitetails as a species, like in general, like they live in the timber. They want to live in the woods, and so the better managed, the better habitat it is.
Yep.
The more you can insulate it with warm season grasses and supplying secondary habitat and cover types that surround it, you'll be better off. But yeah, they want to be in the timber.
I agree. Well, Brandon,
I think. Yeah, the habitat just adds some insulation or adds additional usable cover, right? I mean, they'd much rather, during daylight hours, they're much rather going to be in a habitat field, whether it's CRP or just planted habitat with structure, than just a barren open crop field, harvested crop field, or just pasture that's down to nothing. So.
For sure.
Agree. Before we let you go, I mean, people listening to this if they're interested in like the seed program or working with a Pheasants Forever or Quail Forever biologist, like, what's the best route for them to take to start that process, or at least, get in touch with somebody to get started, kind of like we did with you?
Yeah. So our website for our seed program is pfhabitatstore.com.
Okay.
So PF as in Pheasants Forever, PF, habitatstore.com. They can email seed, SEED, at pheasantsforever.org. If they have custom mix or specific questions, and then we can route them to make sure they get to the correct conservation specialist for their region, their state. And then our national websites are pheasantsforever.org or quailforever.org. And you can there's a find a biologist page, so you can actually see if there's a biologist that covers your actual county, or reach out to the closest biologist you might have. We have some other positions, precision ag positions that we have in some states as well. But there's a lot of information there as well as far as just organizational wise. We're a very diverse organization too, as far as what we have across the board and across the U.S. So a lot of that information is going to be found on those the national websites, Pheasants Forever and quailforever.org.
Cool. Brad, I'm going to get you a bumper sticker for Christmas that says, "I traveled all this way to give you my seed."
Right.
Yeah. There you
absolutely.
Go. It would be appropriate for you. So.
Well, it's cool, man.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things from this that, because obviously our audience is primarily deer, but listening to this to be able to tap into you guys as an organization and be able to, find some information from a habitat side that, really is unfortunately lacking in the whitetail space, right? We talk about this all the time. Like, there isn't really a deer organization anymore. I mean, NDA exists, but is not a habitat organization for deer or anything like that, right? As much as QDMA was, I guess, at one point in time. So, there's this kind of void right now of the deer guys, especially being like, we know habitat is critical to establish and to be able to hold and grow big deer, but we don't really have a good group to go to for it. So, I think for you guys being, even though the name kind of pigeonholes you a little bit there and who you are and what you do, for people listening to this to be able to reach out and find quality habitat experts, I think is an important part.
Absolutely. Those local biologists and everything, that local information, I always say it's free information, right? That should be your first stop. What programs are available? Doesn't mean you have to sign up in them, right? But at least know what's available. Even down to, like, we have chapter habitat grants in Illinois that not every state may have, but for non-program acres, we have some assistance for herbicide application, seeding, invasive species management, all that type of stuff, even outside programs. So definitely reach out. And the quicker you get into or start asking those questions and get into basically the office and get set up, get an application in, maybe go through like, oh, my property doesn't have a farm and tract number. I have to go through that, prove ownership and everything first. Like it sounded like you might have had to do in Kentucky or something.
I did.
Jeremy. And so all of that stuff is like, the quicker the sooner you go and start those conversations locally, the quicker that, because if it's a yearly deadline, right? If you miss the deadline 1 year, you may have to wait an entire year to really be, in that, if it's a program, right? But so that's one of the biggest things is the quicker you get in there and start asking questions and everything to know what's available and what you might be interested in, the better. And we can absolutely, work with anyone based on their goals to try to figure out what programs would work for them or maybe not. Maybe for what you want to accomplish on here, we wouldn't recommend you being in a program, but here's some habitat information,
right,
as far as what you can do.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, man. I think it's perfect. We appreciate you coming on and talking to everybody as well as helping us out. It's kind of we've got a personal Brandon in our back pocket to be able to reach out to when we need it.
Well, and it's a great little trial run here because, and I've mentioned before, like we have a lot of ag acres that at some point in Ohio will convert a portion of to CRP if and when they ever update the Farm Bill. So we'll definitely be leaning on you heavily when the time comes for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We love this stuff. Like I said, I love talking with any landowner on their projects and trying to help them out accomplish goals. And so that's most of our biologists. I mean, spread out across there are going to have, the same passion for habitat and everything that way. So definitely reach out. We'd love to help you.
Hunter Podcast is brought to you by Primos.
Dude, double bull blinds, the original doe can, and who could forget the iconic Magnum buck roar?
I mean, that in a nutshell is Primos for whitetail deer hunters. I mean, that buck roar is by far the best grunt call that's ever been made. I lost it in a CRP field in Kansas, somehow found it, and for the last 10 years, I've been notching every buck that I've called in with that call, and I can tell you there's a lot of marks on it.
There's been a lot of them over the years, man. I can recall. So my dad actually shot that 160-inch 8-point in Ohio a couple years ago. It was double bull blind. I just set that up a few days before, and we've had a lot of success out of those over the years. And so right now, you can use code HUNTER, HUNTR, for a discount off anything on the Primos website. That's primos.com.
Speak the language. Brandon Beltz, Pheasants Forever.
Beltz.
Quail Forever.
Yeah, man, there's a lot to that. It's like just there's a big learning curve we have found in terms of just understanding native species, desirable species, how to manage for or around certain habitat types and stuff. And it's like, I mean, I'm recalling our conversations over the years of like, I don't know, I just want like a thicket. And then we're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, all right, so then we got to manage for this, and or do we have to plant something? And I do honestly feel like we're kind of at a point here where I have a fairly good grasp on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple different ways that you have to look at it, and it's primarily based on geography and what your existing habitat is and or is around you. Like, I am firmly of the opinion, and again, it'll go with time, but I don't think you can plant a thicket. You can't plant to establish a thicket. That doesn't exist.
Well, okay, it begs the question: what is a thicket?
A thicket would be, to me, a woody-based deer favorable habitat. So that would be briars, so greenbrier, blackberry, black raspberry, shrubby type stuff, new growth oaks, and other.
Why not? I mean, you can buy all that stuff.
I just don't think that you can plant. Well, you can buy it, you can plant it, but it's still going to take 4 or 5 years to get there.
Right.
So, in essence, yes, you can plant it, but it's going to take 5+ years to get there, and I think you're going to have a hell of a time manage invasives.
Yeah, that's the tough part with anything you plant.
Because of what you're going to have in the ground.
Right.
How do you spray to control invasives?
Right.
The difference there being in places that are woody dominated already, but per what we were talking about, maybe mismanaged, just, close canopy, etc.
Timber.
I don't think you're going to have as many undesirables and non-natives in those seed beds to deal with when you open up the canopy.
I don't know about that.
I mean, I look at Ohio, for instance.
Yeah.
When we cut Ohio, what has come back there is all desirable woody briars and new growth oaks and things like that.
Like you said, I think that has everything to do with geography, where you're at and stuff. I don't know the reason why, if I did the same cutting that you did on our farm in Ohio.
Because it was pasture before.
Or
cattle had grazed it and therefore dropping things into the soil.
I do think at one time it probably all has been pastured at one time or another.
And I think that's the difference versus in hill country, like that was 100-year-old timber.
I think you're probably right. And I'll go back and say, I think the fastest way to ruin your timber in perpetuity is to put cows in it.
Agree. I would agree.
Because even if you take them out, eventually you're forever going to deal with the compaction and the invasive seed bed that's been distributed.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they have annihilated the native habitat, right? Yeah. Cows are not selective browsers. They will just annihilate everything in sight. Yeah. And what's going to be replaced is invasives and non-natives, and they're going to be able to grow. And most of the time they're undesirable. Like, cows don't eat them because they're thorny and nasty.
I wonder if you could, if there's ever been a study or something to know the level of invasives that exist in correlation with like livestock. You know what I mean?
I bet it's through the roof.
You think so?
Yeah. Again, and I'm not saying it's every place, but I would say most places that you go that have been primarily mature hardwoods, there are very little invasives in those areas.
Interesting.
Because what would introduce them to those spots?
I don't know.
Deer,
birds, people.
Yeah, it's just very little, I think, at that point, versus when you go into these other areas that were either ag. Like, I think ag's the other area. Like, if you let an ag field go fallow, it very much can be dominated by invasives and non-natives. Okay. Just because that they grow faster and outcompete natives in a lot of cases. So it's just in the seed bed. So yeah, I mean, so going back on the planting thing, I think it's really difficult to establish those things because of what's in the seed bed that just wants to outcompete anything that you plant from a native variety.
Right. Which if it's good stuff, great. But if it's invasive stuff, that's the problem. That's a big part of what we're dealing with on all these projects.
Mostly invasive stuff. All natives are just slower to establish than invasives, and that's the reason they're invasive, is that they have characteristics that allow them to grow in either worse conditions and or faster or both than a native variety. Yeah. So a multiflora replaces most of your rubus species, which is blackberry and black raspberries, because it can outgrow them and outcompetes them in those areas.
Right.
Where you don't have it and you have that other stuff in the seed bed, like you see it. That's my hesitancy of like even doing anything with the fields I have in Kentucky, is like I'm finally seeing the desirable woody species that I want to see. And what I don't want to do is spray, even if I spray cleft for grasses and then like Johnson grass comes in, does that choke those out? Like, is it, now I have a whole new problem.
Well, and there's a whole world of chemical there too. And frankly, we should have, I don't know what the term is, but like somebody who knows everything about chemicals to try to understand, like, can you selectively manage for
I'm sure
everything?
I'm sure there's a cocktail mix for everything. Whether you can get away without damaging a desirable, I think is highly, highly unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just you're not going to kill it all, but you're probably going to kill some stuff that's desirable, especially if they're actively growing at the same time. That's the nice thing about cool season grasses is in most cases you just nuke that and unless you're worried about clover, like that, that's about it.
Clover's pretty resilient too. It can take some glide. Well, and at the end of the day, you basically have, you have fire, you have chemical, whether it's cutting or disking. You have fire.
Yep.
Itself.
Yep.
And you have timing, and you have, and I said chemical, right? So those are like your methods of like, do one of those three things at the right time, and you should have some success managing, what's there.
Yep.
And then the planting is the backside of that.
Do you think in hindsight you would have burned before you cut those trees down?
No, I don't think it'll make a difference, honestly.
I mean, I think from a burnability standpoint, it will.
What do you mean?
In terms of like your flame's going to cut up against some of these trees, and I think it's going to go out. You're going to have to restart it.
That's an interesting point. I don't know if there's that many like.
Because that's my thought in some of
trees.
The timber stuff that I have for equip is like it's a cut and burn type thing. Like my plan would be to burn through it and then cut down.
I think it'll go around it for the most part. I think it'll just it'll either jump it or it'll just kind of work around it and go.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't done one like that.
Report back to you on that. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that project.
Yeah, I'll be interested in that. It's
kind of nervous, honestly. Like I'm like, it's a big deal,
Yeah, I think it's not going to get out of control. If anything, you're going to have a really tough time getting it going. That would be my prediction.
In some areas, we may have to jump up into a grassier patch and let it go.
It's just, I think things always are going to burn out of control faster than I expect, and then they like don't even burn. I'm just like, it doesn't go.
Well,
I mean, switchgrass and like those kind of things do, but I'm talking from like a timber-esque type burn.
Which this is way more grass. I mean, when I talk, there's a layer of thatch, like heavy.
But I've assumed there's moisture in there.
Well, there will be, but that grass will burn no matter what. I think when you start getting into the multiflora stuff where it's more like, hey, there's a couple leaves, but it's mostly dirt. Yeah, there's not a lot of fuel in there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it burns.
Yeah, I'll send you a video.
Yeah, and then going after that, I don't know. I guess that was it'll be interesting to see. This mix will be really cool, I think, from a summer forage and fawning cover in the works. I think ultimately you want woody browse in there and cover.
Well, we have a tree planting going into this like next year.
Yeah, there you go.
So there's that. There's also just the long term. Dude, there's a lot of woody structure in this that I don't think is going to get consumed by fire. And I think it's almost...
I don't think any of it's going to... That fire will not be hot enough to break any of that down.
Well, some of it will. Some of it, I'm sure. It's like there's
not the new stuff you cut.
No, not the new stuff. The old stuff. There's piles. It'll almost burn like a brush pile, I bet.
I think you're gonna have to light those. I don't think your fire is gonna be that hot to consume it.
Well, and if not, maybe I'm not intent on getting rid of those. What I'm trying to get rid of is the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And the more structure that stays there, great. Because I think Yeah. But I do think going in and topping those. So today I'm going to take some of the switch and right after the burn, I'll seed the fire break tomorrow actually, and then I think I'll go in after the burn and just spot some heavier switch on some of that structure is what I'm thinking.
That makes sense,
right?
Can't hurt.
Yeah,
I don't think.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, is this part of the equip?
No, it's all prior.
This is all, out of equip.
The only thing that equip would be doing on this section here is the tree planting. Okay, which would be next year.
Okay, so but all this other stuff is not part of like a program or plan.
No,
gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's definitely a different because it is woody, but it's not, which is the challenge that you guys face in most of your stuff. Is like, when you do your timber, unfortunately, it's like multiflora that comes up. Mm-hmm. But everything else there is no cover. Like you have to establish the cover. And I don't have to deal with that very often. Yeah. Which is a huge challenge, I think. I think establishing cover is probably, like establishing quality cover we all are trying to accomplish. Establishing cover out of nothing is probably one of the most uphill challenges out there. Mm-hmm. And it's because you live in an area of deer want to be in timber versus like if you were in Kansas or something, make CRP fields and cedar pockets. Like that's what they want. That's where they lay. Right. But when you're in an area where like it's an eastern deer, like they want to be in timber and you don't have it.
Well, we have plenty of timber. It's just it's poorly managed. There's plenty there to support what we want to do. So I think
I don't think there's that much timber. I mean, you got a lot of field.
Yeah, but you're talking about several hundred acres of timber. I mean, it's plenty. It's plenty. That hunts like it hunts. So it's like the good news is I do think we can see some massive improvement on the timber once we get past the invasive hurdle, which is the first part of equip here. But when trees start coming down, and for the next like 3 to 5 years, so you are talking 5 to 7 years from now.
It's so hard. That's the hardest part.
I do think that the farm as a whole can be like probably 100% better. I think it could be twice as good, or at least hunt twice as big.
Mm-hmm. I think you're gonna have to reduce deer numbers dramatically.
We do. That's definitely part of the strategy.
I think that's a big hurt on the habitat aspect.
Yeah, and I think we can do it pretty effectively. I think we have the ability.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, man. I think it'll be it's an interesting. I don't know anybody that's done this, honestly. That's sprayed and then like done like a mass wooded CRP type planting.
Yeah, it's like a clear cut management.
Yeah, and most clear cuts I know are just left. Like you cut it and you leave it.
Well, hey.
So I don't know. I guess like in the South it's different, right? Like in the South they'll come back with a tree planting, typically pines. Yeah. Cut pines, plant pines. Like that's the. Yeah. But it's
an interesting hybrid of like field and clear cut and old pasture. It's an interesting situation.
Like I said, and I mean it is what it is. It's the hardest part for any of this stuff, and I'm sure people listening to this have the same thought process. Is like there's this time frame thing that like when you make a move like this, it takes time to see the result, and like you just hope 3 years into it the result isn't not what you want, because then it's like you just burnt 3 years. And I've done that on some farms where I'm just like,
oh, it'll happen. And it'll happen again in the future for sure. I don't know, man. I just love doing it. I love the habitat. We try to do it the right way, as much as we can. But, hey, if in 3 years it's not exactly what I want, I won't look at it as like,
sure,
a failure necessarily. It'll just be, it's just part of the evolution of the farm, and it's a lifer farm, right? It's not one that
that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
It's the ones that aren't lifers. It's hard to work on a 3 or 4 or 5 year project and then at the end of it be like, shit.
Yeah, it's tough.
You want to mention what Brandon was just talking about there?
Yeah, so after we got off with Brandon, he offered a promo code. It'll just be Hunter, HUNTR. You can use on the...
It's phhabitatstore.com. That's where all the seed is at.
That's the seed from Pheasants Forever.
Yep.
And so that'll run, I believe, through the end of April. I don't know the discount amount, but it'll be some. So if you guys are looking to get...
Sense of urgency. There's basically you're going to have a couple weeks to use the code.
Yep. So if you're looking to get a seed blend sooner than later, for any or all of the above of like what we talked about, they have some food plot seed there as well.
Nick pin this at the top or something.
Yep. You can use code Hunter for discount on that. So
there you go. Other than that, we appreciate everyone listening to this episode with Brandon Beltz from Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, and we will catch you on the next one.
Later.
Take me